Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning into today's session. So for the people who are attending live, and then for those of you who are going to be watching later, my name is Momina, and I am your session coordinator for the night. And today we are joined by Kevin Fernandes, a corporate lawyer. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Kevin, and then we can get started.
Thanks, Momina. Nice to meet you. Pleasure to meet everyone virtually. It's weird, but it's kind of what we've been doing for the last little while. So good to see everyone and pleasure to join you. Like I said, or as Momina nicely said, I'm Kevin Fernandes. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer. I'm a transaction lawyer, so I help people do deals. And I'm here and excited to talk with you today and go through kind of what I do day to day and the process going to law school and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much. So I want to start right from the very beginning. That's usually how we start these sessions, and talk about your undergrad career and what type of courses you took, what that maybe did for you in the future, and how you ended up in law school. Just kind of like your education path, if you would.
Certainly. So I actually did political studies at Queen's. That was my undergraduate program. And I started off like most undergraduate arts and science students. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had, in high school, I honestly didn't put a lot of thought into where I was going to go to university. I had three options to apply for university. So I applied to U of T Mississauga because I'm from Mississauga, Western, and Queen's because why not? And I got into all three. And then I said, oh, darn, that didn't help make my decision. So I went up to Queen's. And when I was there, I took your usual survey courses, history and politics and psychology and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the first year, I decided, you know what? I really enjoy politics. I don't know what I like about it, but it seems interesting. It seems interactive. So I took that. I enjoyed it. Would I do it again? Well, yeah, sure. It was a good experience. If I could do things over again, I would probably do a commerce degree. About halfway through my undergraduate program, I started to realize that I cared more about how things run and how things operate. So I started taking more programs through the Queen's School of Business, which is now the Smith School of Business. And so I had the opportunity to take courses in marketing and, sales and in international business law, that kind of stuff, which kind of made me think, you know what, this is pretty fun. This is more aligned with what I want to do. And maybe I want to keep doing this for a career. So I, of course, said, what should I do? I'll write the LSAT. And I did that. And I'll tell you point blank up front, it did not do amazing the first time. So I had to make some other decisions. Apologies, I'm just moving my screen here so I can actually see you properly. And so I did a master's. I went to Queen's. I stayed at Queen's. And I did a master's in political science, doing Canadian politics. And I focused on elections and election type of, politics, how voters vote and how people think about issues during elections and that kind of stuff. I jokingly say I got a master's in spin doctor. I thought I was going to work in politics. I thought I was going to be in issue management. And I was really torn. Do I want to be in communications, crisis communications? And maybe along those lines, kind of influenced my decision to write my master's paper on, and it's very popular, defending the reputation of Shell and BP against Amnesty International and other non-governmental organizations, which didn't make me a terribly popular fellow, but it certainly gave me some insight into, wait, political parties deal with scandals and that kind of thing every day. How might businesses deal with that type of thing? And how can one build up reputation capital to kind of offset or head up potential issues? So I didn't think about law school at that point either. I thought I was going to be a communicator. And by starting grad school and working through grad school, I said, well, I'm probably not going to get a PhD. It's not really my thing. I enjoyed my master's, but I'd probably not do a PhD. Well, I didn't do well in the LSAT the first time. Let me work. So I went to work for a little while, and that was great. It helped to pay down student debt. It helped to kind of, put some things in perspective. I wrote through LSAT again, and I got in. So let that be the first thing I'll mention, is that I didn't coast into law school. That's one of the things that I think the LSAT was the first thing I did from high school that I said, oh, this is going to be something I've got to dig in and work at. Undergrad, sure, there was an adjustment period. There was getting used to new courses and ways of studying and grading. That was the biggest thing to get used to. And then I kind of figured it out. But the LSAT was the first obstacle that I really had to grasp with and wrangle with. And all good things work out where they should. And I ended up in law school. So I think my business experience working, I worked at a pension fund for a couple of years, helping to do records management and that kind of stuff. It helped me see what other people were doing. The people who were putting together deals, they were typically accountants, or CPAs, or that type of accounting finance background, or they had a CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst designation. So, well, I'm not really a numbers inclined fellow. So maybe who else is doing deals? Well, lawyers are doing deals. And I enjoyed the type of work that was being done. I said, you know what? That's what I want to do. And I went to law school with an open mind. And I'll kind of pause there so that you can maybe save the law school experience for another question.
Thanks. It's really interesting to hear your experience about business and politics, especially because you were saying that it's not like you had the mindset, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. This is what I want to do. This is how to get there. And it was kind of like you found your way. And I wanted to talk about that specifically, actually, because I myself want to be a politician. However, the thing in politics is if you don't get elected, you don't really have a job. Your occupation is extremely contingent, and a lot of political staffing is contingent on who's in opposition and who's in power. So I was wondering, where did you get the epiphany that actually I don't want to do business or politics, law is the career that's best for me? Because I know a lot of students like myself are sitting in this weird limbo where we're not sure of where to go.
Well, I'll kind of work backwards. When a lot of times when I get engaged by a client, I talked to one earlier today, a potential client, and they're very excited. They're very much in the weeds. I'm in the moment. I love what I'm doing, and they just want to tell you all the things. Well, all the things are not all the things lawyers need. We do a part of things. We don't do your marketing. We don't do your sales. We don't do other functions of your business. We're going to help you protect with risk and address your risk and manage your risk. And paper transactions and paper agreements amongst parties so that there's certainty. Adding certainty through a contract or a written document is a great way to have something to point to and to enforce your rights. Well, quite often what we do is we kind of distill out what someone actually wants, what things align with what they do and how things maybe fit into their total plan. And I sat back and went, well, what do I enjoy about being involved with politics? I volunteered for a campaign. I helped to knock on doors and meet people, and that was quite exciting. Got to meet a lot of different politicians, and that was exciting. But just like, and I'm not saying no in the future, but I don't think that's something I want to do. And, I know a lot of lawyers, other professionals do, but a lot of lawyers become politicians. That's great. Also, where do my skill sets align? And can I see myself doing something that has such kind of volatility? But I do enjoy helping people. And I can't say every single day I get to help people, but more often than not, I do. It might be different issues than in politics. I'm not helping someone because they were locked out of their house or their rent has, gone up too high and they can't afford their house, or a business owner who can't afford, the current economic climate to operate their business. I can't say I do that, but I can say that quite often I deal with small and medium-sized business owners and people who have aspirations to grow a business, to start a business, that they have questions. And that's really influenced how I practice law. And I took the skill sets of a politics major and doing some business courses. Not saying I got a minor in business, but some courses, and said, well, how can we apply that skill set a different way? And law schools let me kind of blossom that way.
That makes a lot of sense. So going further into detail with that, can you describe your law school experience, what it was like for you, hardships, ups, downs, courses?
Well, I will say it was up and down. And every journey is different. Every student is different. Like I said, I didn't get into law school in the first crack, so I certainly didn't go to law school on a whim because I had to reapply, and that's fine. It's totally normal. There are a lot of people who want to go to law school, whether they actually want to be lawyers or not, because law school is a great training for being an analytical thinker, job opportunities, that kind of thing. A lot of colleagues I went to Dalhousie at the Schulich School of Law. A lot of my colleagues from there are doing a lot of other things that are not law, but they got a rigorous analytical kind of mindset from attending law school. So that's great. Now, I'm from Mississauga, and so I had moved away to go to Queens for my undergrad and my master's. That was great. I'd moved home for a bit. But now I was moving to Halifax. I'd never been to Halifax, so I flew down one weekend. I was like, well, this isn't Kansas anymore. Not because Halifax is a non-thriving metropolis. It certainly is. There's a lot of exciting things. It just dawned on me, I'm going to be really far away from my family. And I don't have any friends here. And one thing that Dalhousie did very well, the Schulich School of Law did very well. They did many things well, but they did a welcome barbecue. And it was hosted at an upper years house the summer prior. And they did a couple of meet and greets beforehand. So you had the opportunity to meet people who've gone through that transition, whether they're from out east and now work in Toronto or somewhere that's where I am, or they're from the area, the GTA, and are going to Halifax. There's people there to support you. There's a real collegiality. That really helped with the adjustment. But in first year, you're basically told what to do and you are streamed. And what I mean by that is it's a baseline training. It's training that I cannot tell you I refer to every single contractual principle I learned in first year, but offer, acceptance, and consideration forms the very basis of every single contract that we enter into. The basic first principles we think about every single day. I think about things like a corporation is a separate legal entity every single day. It's ingrained in how I think. And that's what first year does. So you're taking courses like legal research and writing, an introductory to law, like a theory and history of law kind of course, depending on your law school. Contracts, introduction to contracts, torts. So our interactions with one another, duty of care, standard of care. You're dealing with public law, so our administrative law system, our human rights systems, how the government regulates, that kind of thing. Those are typical courses that are offered in first year. Now there's other ones like property law and some intensive one-off courses. Like we had to do a tested exam in front of a professor for our orientation to law course, and a moot, which is a practice argument for a trial type matter. And that's done in front of a panel. It's quite exciting. It gets you going because they want to get you on your feet and going. But it's rigorous. Everyone does the same courses in first year. And you're also graded on a curve. That's important to know that out of a class of however many, only so many can get A's, a bunch can get B's, a bunch can get C's, and some people have to get D's in order to weight the average where it needs to go. That's something I didn't know before law school. Another thing is, you go to law school and you start and you go, wow, that's a lot of reading. You're told ahead of time, that's a lot of reading. But a lot of people fall into the trap of going, well, I must be the first person who's ever read this stuff ever. No. One thing you learn very quickly in law school is that precedents and past experience are the formation for future law and how we interpret law and how we grow with our legal understanding. So there are many people who've gone before you who have written summaries, have written notes, who've synthesized, explained connections, rationalized different things that instead of just reading the document fresh, and you should definitely read everything you can, you should also look at secondary sources and go, wow, someone's already distilled this for me. This is great. Well, I realized that about second year. And let's just say my grades and experience went up over time. Now, on the personal side, I'll say two things. One, I got pretty involved with law school in a couple of ways. I got involved with the Domus Legia Society, which is a law student-run society. It's a social group, so I met people from across Canada. That's one thing I loved about Dal. I've got friends from Vancouver through Newfoundland. It's fantastic. St. John's through to Vancouver. It's fantastic. And I can call any of them tomorrow with a question. It's fantastic because so much of the law in Canada is federal, but a bunch of it's at the provincial level. And having those colleagues to bounce ideas off is huge, and refer files as well. Those relationships mean so much when practicing law. I'd argue more than the actual substance that you learn. And by playing hockey, it was a great opportunity to meet people and to kind of forge those relationships. I did that. I got involved with the Alumni Association and a bunch of other organizations, including the Business Law Association, because I said, I want to really learn about practical opportunities. And thanks to a bunch of the local law firms, McInnes Coopers and the Boyne Clarks and that kind of thing in Halifax, some of the lawyers volunteered their time to go through what is a shareholders agreement? Oh, what's the basic things that go into a transaction? Because in law school, it's very theory-based. This is kind of, a principle, rescission, contracts. Sounds good. When you go to some of those practical out-of-class things, they explain how do those things work in a real-life scenario. So that was really good. And I'd say the more practical stuff I learned, the more interest I had as well, and everything kind of moved up. So I started taking courses like business associations, securities law, corporate commercial transactions, construction law, oil and gas law, courses that I found fit. And I also had the opportunity to do a director research paper. So my tax prof, Jeffrey Loomer, is a fantastic prof. He agreed to supervise a paper that I wrote, which looked at how directors evaluate different considerations when making a decision for their company and guiding the company. And it was around paying your fair share of tax. What does it mean to pay a fair share of tax? How does it fit within tax law and the literature? Something that I cared a lot about, but there wasn't a specific course in it. So he offered a course. I could basically learn about it all my time and get it, one-on-one time with him. Because that's also really important. Really important for undergrad, really important for grad school. I found it super helpful for law school was office hours are there so that you can go and interact and try to make the pieces fit. I can assure you in law school, there's a time well-known heuristic, IRAC, issue, rule, application, conclusion. Any legal problem can basically be broken down to that. What's the issue? What is the applicable rule or the applicable rules? How do I apply the rules to that issue? It's the application. And what should I do about it? Conclusion. That's basically every legal problem. It's every day I'm practicing. What does someone need? How do I do it? Run through the heuristic. And the more you do it in law school, the more comfortable you get. So it really changed the way I thought about problems and the way I engage with challenges by just doing coursework and getting involved in the community.
I really appreciate that advice, Kevin, especially you breaking it down so finitely. And I think the most notable piece of advice, at least for me, was you talking about the secondary sources, because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, now that I'm in law school, I have to read every single book and do every single assignment. But no one really thinks that someone's already distilled this material, read it, summarized it, had a thesis on it that I could also potentially look at, which is great, especially when you're managing your time, which is actually my next question for you. So law school is a lot more rigorous than the university lifestyle. You have a lot more assignments and essays and things you have to do. So my question to you is, how do you balance a social life in all of that? Because I know for me, I'm an extremely social person and very outgoing. I have a lot of friends. I like to do a lot of things. But the higher up I've gone in university and in education, I've seen myself having to limit these social interactions to focus on education. So I wanted to ask you, as someone who's experienced in this, who's done hockey, basketball, been in all these clubs with friends from Vancouver, Prince Edward Island, all of that, how did you manage such an active social life and still manage to get your degree and all of the things you needed?
So I'd answer that by saying it really comes down to you and what you want, the individual wants. And the only person who's going to hold you accountable is you, which sounds terrible, but quite honestly, your law school experience is what you made out of it, what you make out of it. It's like, I'm very grateful I went to grad school, because in grad school, sure, it's a Socratic method. You can be called on at any time. It's usually a small group of people. So you get used to being engaged. Why? Because you may get lit up. And that kind of shifts over time. You initially start with fear. I'm going to read this stuff to understand it, so I fear it. And then you're like, but maybe I actually kind of enjoy it, and how the stuff kind of fits together. And I found that really how it worked in law school was I started off reading for the sake of reading. I must get through this, instead of saying, well, how does it click together? Why are we learning this? What does this mean? I looked at the syllabus today for an undergraduate course in law for, I don't know if it was McMaster or a school near me. I went, wow, I've touched on all of these areas before. But in undergrad or in law school, I would have been like, why are we doing this? And having that perspective now is very helpful. But in terms of managing your time, it's really about working smarter, not harder. I felt like in first year and maybe the beginning of second year, because there's still some mandatory courses in second year, at least at Dow, at some other schools you do in first year, like constitutional law. You got to take it. Well, we have to take it in second year. And it's a big, intense course and you got to do it. And fine. But at some point you start to lose the forest for the trees. I focus on these little things. I'm missing the bigger perspective. And I started really working on condensing my readings into digestible pieces. In law, we call that the ratio. What is the point? Why should we care? How does this fit into my analysis? And then you start to think about things a lot differently. Okay, if the test is X, what this case does is it adds a scenario. If this thing happens, then this case tells us what to do, or that case tells us how to look at it. It starts to fit into your kind of decision tree of where things kind of go. Work smarter, not harder. Now, don't get me wrong. Law school is also a great time. I got to do a lot of social activities that, wouldn't have been able to be possible if I was commuting to school. And that's just the reality of the situation. And once I started to be able to manage the two in terms of saying, this has to be done before I do that, or I need to achieve these things before I go do this, that allowed me to take more accountability and allowed me to feel a lot more efficacy, that I could control what output was coming.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Kevin. And moving on from your education, I wanted to talk about your specific occupation now and the type of law you do. So I know you're a corporate commercial lawyer. So I was just wondering if you could describe what that is first for our viewers, and then after that, what a typical day would look like for you.
So I'll tell you about my articling experience before I tell you about my practice experience. So I was very fortunate to article at a general practitioner's office in Hamilton. And at that office, I got exposure to civil litigation, to going to court. I got exposure to a little bit of criminal law, a little bit of wills and estates, real estate, corporate commercial, some intellectual property and employment law, maybe a family law matter. What are we at 8 now? Something like that. It was a large set of experience. And it was great because it's overwhelming. And I didn't take all those courses in law school, and I had to write these bar exams and all these types of things. I can talk more about those later. But it was a kind of a sink or swim experience. And it was very good because the practitioner that I worked for, he empowered. What I mean was he was not a micromanager. He wanted to know what was going on, how things worked, but he let you work through different challenges. And I've developed a strong appreciation, one, because he gave me the opportunity. If I did an article, I was going to have a hard time becoming a lawyer. And also, he allowed me to grow. And I grew a lot. And I was there for about 2.5 years. So articling is about 10 months. And then the little time before you got called to the bar, I was there for about a year and a bit. And then I made a move to Kaiser Mason Ball, which is where I am currently. In Kaiser Mason Ball, instead of being a sole practitioner or a smaller practitioner's office, we have close to 30 lawyers. And the difference is if a client of mine needs a will done, they won't be coming to me to do a will. I have fantastic colleagues. Our estate succession and business transition group, that group is led by a partner. She has a team that deals with that. Someone has got a branding or a franchising issue. I'm not the person. Another partner has a team that does it. Real estate, so on and so forth. So we kind of have little specialties. And the specialty I'm part of a team led by a partner that we do transactional work. What does that mean? Well, I'm a corporate commercial lawyer first. What does that mean? I help people start a business, so incorporate, set up a sole proprietorship, maybe do a partnership. Okay, great. Start it, manage it, so organize it, put in some basic contracts, that kind of thing to get their business running. Then I help them scale up or grow their business. So maybe they want to bring in an investor. So whether it's an accredited investor, someone who meets certain investment tests certain financial asset tests or income tests, and they want to invest in the business. So they see, kind of like Dragon's Den, if you were to think about it. Or you want to have a friends and family raise, meaning, a parent or a spouse or a family member, like a brother or sister, wants to put money in. You have a relationship with them, or a director, someone like that wants to put money in to scale up the business. And then perhaps you want to then take it public. Well, that's not me, but I have a lot of good friends in Toronto who do that. And then someone might say, you know what, though, I don't want to take it public. Actually, I want to hold it, grow it to a certain point, and then I want to sell it. And what our team does is we help people get ready for sale and then eventually sell their business or transition. Maybe they want to sell it to management. It's not a third-party sale out in the market. It's to the internal management team. Or they want to do an estate freeze, which is a type of corporate reorganization where they transfer to the next family members, like the kids, for example, and they still stay in somewhat control as that transition happens. So we help with those things. And out of that, you'll see the two other areas we do, M&A. And what M&A is, we help business owners do a mergers and acquisitions transactions. We either act for a seller or a buyer looking to acquire either the assets or the shares of a company. And we help people draft the documents, whether it's an asset purchase agreement or a share purchase agreement. There's two there. And I can kind of dig through that in a second and tell you some basic differences between them. And then the ancillary documents and related documents. So you'll see things like consulting agreements, if someone's staying on to help transition the business, a non-competition agreement. You might see a deferred payment kind of situation where you're going to see agreements that deal with security for payment that's owed after closing and the terms that people get for that money. And then all the closing documents. How do we actually authorize and close this transaction? You've got resolutions, the directors where appropriate, the shareholders, the officers. You've got different certificates confirming things, and it's all organized by way of a closing agenda. That's one type of transaction we do. Then there's private equity transactions. Those are more if those accredited investors putting in money, or friends and family raise for those kind of people, or a close family friend or business partner. So someone that's related to you, knows you, they know your business, they know you. That's another way to raise money. Or employees, you might do some documents where people come on, they might need to sign certain agreements, like a shareholders agreement or a share restriction agreement. We've got to comply with securities law in Ontario. It's an exempt distribution, so it's not public, it's not a prospectus required, but there's still some documents required, and we help people with that too. Now, to put that into about 5 words, we help people start, grow, shift, and transition their practice or their business.
And that's pretty much your job as a commercial corporate lawyer.
That's what I do. But
Thank you, Kevin.
I want to be clear, like, there's so many other things you can do as a corporate commercial lawyer. You can be intellectual property focused, trademarks, copyrights, licensing of different intellectual property. That's not what we do, but that's still a corporate commercial lawyer. You might be a corporate commercial lawyer that really focuses on franchises. And the franchise system is very unique in Canada. It's governed by specific legislation, and someone might focus on that. Or you might have someone that does wills and estates, working with business owners or reorganizations, transferring assets and moving things around using the provisions of the Tax Act. Again, some corporate commercials do it as part of M&A, some don't. I do some of it with a different partner. It's very different. There's also secured lending, people getting money from banks, and corporate finance and banking law. There's a lot of other parts of corporate commercial law that our team doesn't do, but we're kind of involved with in support ways or related ways.
Yeah, I know under this umbrella of corporate commercial law, there's so many subgenres and sub things that you can do. And I appreciate you breaking down your specific one so meticulously. In terms of the next question I had, I know that a lot of our viewers know they want to be lawyers, but they're struggling to choose which specific practice of law. Do they want to do family? Do they want to do tort, criminal, those types of things? So I was wondering if you had any advice for the people who are undecisive. So they know they're going to do law, but they can't really decide which exact field they want to go into yet.
So, like I mentioned, before law school, I liked the corporate commercial stuff. And I kept a somewhat open mind when I got to law school, but ended up coming back to corporate commercial law. I mean, let's just think about things I did. Business Law Association, the courses I mentioned, taking that kind of thing, right? So fine. And then life threw a wrench, right? I'm working at a general practice firm. And that gave me a chance to sit back and really reflect. Do I enjoy this? Do I not enjoy this? I had the sincere opportunity to represent a client at the Court of Appeal for Ontario. And that was an exciting experience. It was a challenging experience, but it allowed me to go, do I enjoy litigation work? Is this how I see myself building a life and a practice? Maybe not, maybe not. Could I see myself closing a lot of real estate deals, so volumes, so residential real estate or refinancings? Well, I've done them, but I don't get up in the morning wanting to do this per se. It's important, but it's not something. Family law, so on and so forth. That experience was very illustrative in going, what do I want to do? And the opportunity with my current firm kind of came up organically. And it was a chance the universe was saying, you know what, you've learned a couple things, but you can grow and really focus in your practice. And when I came over to KNB, they said, listen, thanks for joining, but we're going to assume you know nothing. We're going to assume you start from zero. And we're going to train you in our image. And I've kind of had the opportunity to really junior, and now I'm working in a more of a mid-level role, learn by watching the partners work and observing. A lot of what you do as a junior day to day is observing and assisting and supporting and learning how the pieces kind of fit together. A firm like ours, it's really big on letting you walk before you run. And because when you run real quick. I'd say probably in the last year or so, I've been doing more and more transactions. Give you it on my own with some support, a little bit of support, questions here and there. You can always ask questions. Partners ask each other questions all the time. Partners ask juniors questions all the time on a specific area. Like I work with our firm's professional clients, doctors, lawyers, accountants, those regulated type of industries. Often I get partners asking, can a company that's a PC do this? Can they not? Just because they're a partner doesn't mean they don't ask questions. You only grow when you ask questions. So the one way to learn which area you want to do is to kind of get some exposure. And life allowed me to have that by practicing and articling at a general practice place. Now, for me, deciding to be a corporate commercial lawyer, and that's where I am, that's not out of the vacuum of saying I enjoyed working at the pension fund I worked at because I got to see the business side of it. I got to see, wait, it's not just a room full of lawyers, which is what a private practice is. It's quite often it's a bunch of lawyers talking to lawyers about law. And got to see the business application. A lot of times I got to go along with my boss as a student at the pension fund to watch how those pieces of advice or implications were actually applied by people to a business decision. We want to send out this communication. Can we, or does it offend this provision or this law? Ooh, there's a real business problem. We want to send out this communication, as opposed to a vacuum. So I really enjoy that too. And I've become more involved with the management of the firm. I help chair one of the committees at the firm, not management, but helping to run a different part of the portfolio so that the partners can focus on other types of management. So I'd say finding the things I enjoy and the things I'm passionate about. As you might gather, I could talk for 40 minutes straight unless you put your hand up to stop me about corporate commercial things. I can talk about transactions, things that have gone weird, things that have gone great, things that surprise me, things that don't surprise me anymore. That's something I'm passionate about. And I come from a family where entrepreneurialism and risk-taking is something that is key and something that's part of the flavor appetite. And being able to, my father-in-law runs a business, and looking to him every day, I'm getting a little bit, taken aback because he runs the business. He's the president of that business. He's responsible for that business. And any sort of legal advice that's given needs to fit within that. How do I run my business mantra? And that's how I try to take it for clients, provide reasonable, useful, and practical advice that fits in what they're trying to do. I can't tell them what to do as a business owner. That's a business decision. But I can tell you what the risks, the rewards, the potential consequences, or potential benefits are, and you can make a business decision as you see fit. But I want to empower clients to have the information to do that. Whether you're a family law lawyer or a business lawyer, it doesn't matter. But if there's a subject area that gets you excited and makes you want to talk and be involved with, then that's probably the one for you. And if you don't know that right away, that's just you being honest with yourself. Saying, you know what, I need some more time to find it. Or maybe I'm never going to find it. And what really makes me happy? What the skill sets do I want to grow and build?
I think your articling experience talking about that was particularly beneficial just because you talked about doing a bunch of different areas and then saying, I kept going back to commercial. So obviously that's where your heart was and what you wanted to do. I want to kind of switch gears and talk about something a little bit different, specifically applications to go into firms. So Kaiser is a huge firm. Like you said, you have like 30 lawyers there. And obviously, big firms are a bit more competitive than smaller firms. And I was just wondering, in terms of applications, when they're hiring lawyers or employees, is there anything that would give an applicant such as myself or the viewers in the future that edge that partners are looking for? What type of lawyers do they want in their firm? Because obviously we'll all have the JD, we'll all have the same qualifications. Is there something that will set us apart?
I think practical experience, being able to walk the walk in addition to talk the talk, which is hard the more junior you are. How are you supposed to walk the walk if you're barely learning how to talk the talk? But in your law school experience, in your volunteer experience, being able to say, I've worked on some of the skills that they don't teach in law school is very helpful. Interacting with people, giving presentations, analyzing information, taking a leadership role, those kind of things are really important to the practice of law. I think we'll actually dovetail this question towards what I do every day, because I didn't answer that question for you. But it's really important to say, well, what skills are needed to be a lawyer? What can I do as a partner or as a senior lawyer to know I have trust in lawyer X to be able to do what they need to do, and that they'll ask the right questions, that they'll not be afraid to say, I don't think this fits. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't make a reasonable regard for trying to figure something out. There's a big difference between not being afraid to ask a question and kind of just not taking the initiative to answer a question on your own and come up with some solutions and testing them by someone. You know what? I think it's ABC, and really I think it's C, but can I ask you to confirm? Is a lot better than, I don't know. Well, did you even try? No, that's why I came to you, is not going to endear yourself very well. Being able to show that you've been a go-getter and taken that initiative in the past helps us feel comfortable that, you know what, they'll probably do that in the future. Why? Past behavior is the best predictor of future results.
I really
Did
like
you want
that.
me to jump in?
I'm going to write that down. Past behavior is the best predictor of future results.
It's not perfect, but I mean, it's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, I agree. I never thought of it that way. You can go ahead and just jump in as to what you do in your day to day.
So, I mean, like the adult diapers, it depends. That's one of my favorite quotes. So I have the pleasure of practicing in a team. So what does that mean? I am the middle person. We have a partner. This is one of the teams I work on, but this is for M&A and corporate commercial and private equity. There's a partner, and he's got a lot of his own clients, his own files, his own deals. I'm the middle. I've got a bunch, but not all, of my own clients, transactions, and deals I'm working on. And then there's a fellow named Matt, who's kind of the third person on the team, who helps us with the drafting kind of stuff. So typically on a day-to-day basis, I also work with my assistant, who's wonderful in keeping me organized and helping me stay on top of certain drafting tasks, as well as law clerks. We have 3 law clerks in our group, and they vary. So whether it's doing filings and drafting of certain documents, it really depends on someone's skill set. You kind of divide it up and their experience set. But at Kaiser Mason Ball, one of the things we pride ourselves on are lawyers are drafters, because you cannot teach until you know how to do. There's no point in bringing something in and just passing it off and not checking it. Why? You're not providing a service to your client. And that's something that we kind of really take on as being very important, is we take ownership for our files. If something goes wonky, and something can go wonky, it's just possible. We're all human. It's about owning something and being able to understand how things fit together and deal with it. That's why we take a very personal approach. What does that mean in the day-to-day, though? So I'm typically working from about 7:30 in the morning. Pre-COVID, it was probably 6:30 or 7, and it's kind of slid a little bit.
You get to
And
sleep in. Yay.
well, normally I would be driving, and so I'd want to miss the traffic, and so I would get up really, really early. And now it's just kind of sliding a little bit. But I'm typically at a computer by at least 7:30, around 7:38, and am available to clients to have calls. 8:30 is the earliest, and it goes through the day. In terms of lunches and that kind of thing, normally, lawyers, we like to go out for lunch and meet clients and interact and check in on them. And it's a lot better than a phone call. But, that doesn't happen as much these days. And a lot of my day is spent on Zoom calls and phone calls. And what are we talking about? Well, typically we're either confirming instructions, taking instructions, or strategizing with clients about what solution they're looking for. What are you trying to achieve? And how can we kind of help you do that in terms of a structure or a product? Do you need an operating agreement? Do you need a new company? Do you need to do a reorganization? You want to buy a company? Okay, what's the first step? Have you put some thought towards a letter of intent? So on and so forth. Or we're reviewing things. So we prepared a share purchase agreement. Okay, we've put these things together, but we want to walk through the implications with you to make sure we have this all correct. Or we've received one from a potential buyer and we're reviewing with you to make sure it aligns with what you want to do in the terms and conditions that you are going to live by. So that's a lot of what we're doing is we're on the phone or Zoom a lot during the day. I typically like to use the early morning when I'm not on calls, the first couple hours of every day. I try to use it as my drafting time because my head is clearest first thing in the morning. Now, the afternoon, I find a nice sweet spot for productivity between about 1:30 and 3:30 or so when I can sit down and draft. A lot of what I'm doing these days is reviewing documents, making sure that things fit, requesting revisions, and confirming things with clients, in terms of actual work product. And then towards the later part of the day, I'm probably going to be on a conference call or a seminar with respect to an industry association. So we're part of a couple of different industry associations for networking purposes, or I use it as drafting time. And I work till about typically 6:37 at night, sometimes later. And then, every once in a while, you log in after dinner time. You log in for a couple hours, at the end of the day if there's something you got to work on. So that's what a day typically looks like for me.
Nice. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I think we're nearing the end of our session. So to end off, I usually like to end these sessions just asking you if you just have any advice that you would be giving to your younger self at any point in time to make sure that you were set up for a successful law career, or anything you would have to give to the next generation of aspiring lawyers.
I would really, really stress the point where I said you're not the first person that's done this, and don't be afraid to know that and to embrace it. It's super important and super helpful because it'll help you find context quicker. The mentor I have at our firm right now is very strong on, well, let's go back to first principles. If you've got a contract, I'll give you an anecdote. Starbucks, as the story goes, was started on the back of a napkin. Offer, acceptance, consideration. That's all that's required for a contract. That's all that's needed. And so if you keep that at the back of your mind, or a corporation is a separate legal person, when you're talking to a client, you can kind of make sure that's always at the forefront. You will make sure you're building a strong foundation moving forward. If you've got a strong foundation, you can build up or wherever you want to go, but don't forget to go back and revisit and realize that you're not the first person to have done something.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I told you myself, I thought that was the most memorable piece of advice that I was going to take with me. And thank you for coming to do this session with us. I know I appreciate it, and everyone at Pre-Law Shadowers and our readers do. And I just want to thank you for your time and coming again.
Thank you very much. You have a great day, and have a great weekend, everyone.
You too. Bye to everybody who's watching as well.